George Lucas built a galactic empire, but behind the scenes he was waging war with some of Hollywood's biggest names. The man who gave us Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader had a dark side that few ever saw, until now. For decades, Lucas wielded his power like a Sith Lord, blacklisting actors, ending careers and holding grudges that lasted longer than the Death Star's construction. These weren't just creative differences or personality clashes. These were blood feuds that split the industry and revealed the ruthless businessman behind the beloved filmmaker. Tonight we're exposing the 7 actors who crossed George Lucas and paid the ultimate price. From legendary stars who challenged his vision to rising talents who dared to speak out, these performers learned that in Lucas's galaxy there's no forgiveness for betrayal. The Empire strikes back, and it strikes hard. This is the untold story of Hollywood's most powerful vendetta machine. Number 7. Sean Connery. The man who defined James Bond should have been perfect for George Lucas's vision of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Instead, their meeting became one of the most legendary rejections in Hollywood history, and the beginning of a decades-long grudge. In 1976, Lucas was desperately seeking an older actor with gravitas to play the wise Jedi Master. Connery was at the top of his list. The Scottish actor had the presence, the voice, and the international appeal that Lucas needed for his space opera. But when Lucas pitched Star Wars to Connery, the veteran actor's response was brutal. "I read the script," Connery later revealed in interviews. "Frankly, I didn't understand it. The dialogue was incomprehensible nonsense. I told George it sounded like a children's fairy tale written by someone who'd never heard real people speak." Lucas was devastated. This wasn't just a rejection, it was a public humiliation from one of cinema's most respected figures. Connery didn't just say no, he mocked the entire project, calling it juvenile fantasy and questioning Lucas's ability as a writer. The wound cut deep because Lucas genuinely admired Connery's work. He'd envisioned the Bond actor bringing dignity and weight to the Jedi mythology. Instead, Connery treated Star Wars like a joke. When Star Wars became a global phenomenon, Connery's representatives quietly reached out about potential roles in the sequels. Lucas's response was ice cold. Never again. True to his word, Lucas never offered Connery another role. When other directors suggested the Scottish actor for various Lucasfilm projects over the years, George would shut down the conversation immediately. The man who could have been Obi-Wan became persona non grata in the Lucas universe. Number 6. Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell's audition for Han Solo should have been a slam dunk. He had the swagger, the charm, and the roguish appeal that Lucas was looking for. Instead, it became a masterclass in how creative differences can destroy professional relationships. Russell arrived at the audition confident and prepared. He'd studied the script, understood the character, and had his own ideas about how Han Solo should be portrayed. That was his first mistake. According to multiple sources present at the audition, Russell immediately began suggesting changes to the dialogue. He wanted Han to be more psychologically complex, more emotionally vulnerable. He pushed for deeper character development and more dramatic weight. Lucas listened politely, then delivered his verdict. "I'm not looking for Hamlet in space. I need someone who can deliver these lines as written and make them work." Russell persisted, arguing that the character needed more depth, more realistic motivations. He even suggested rewriting entire scenes to give Han a more compelling backstory. That's when Lucas lost his patience. "This isn't a collaboration," Lucas reportedly told Russell. "This is my vision. If you can't serve that vision, you're not right for this role." Russell left the audition convinced he'd made his case. Instead, he'd made an enemy. Lucas later told friends that Russell represented everything he hated about method actors. The arrogance, the assumption that they knew better than the director, the inability to trust the material as written. When Russell's career took off with films like Escape from New York and The Thing, Lucas made sure to badmouth him to other directors. He called Russell difficult and self-indulgent, effectively poisoning the well for potential collaborations. Russell, for his part, never understood what went wrong. In later interviews, he expressed confusion about Lucas's hostility, saying he was only trying to make the character better. But for Lucas, that attitude was unforgivable. Number 5. William Hurt. William Hurt's clash with George Lucas revealed the filmmaker's deep contempt for what he called pretentious intellectualism in Hollywood. Their brief encounter during prequel casting became a case study in incompatible artistic philosophies. In the late 1990s, as Lucas prepared to launch the prequel trilogy, Hurt was considered for several key roles, including Qui-Gon Jinn and later Mace Windu. The Oscar-winning actor was at the height of his dramatic powers, known for his intense, psychologically complex performances. But from their first meeting, Lucas and Hurt were oil and water. Hurt approached the Star Wars universe like he was preparing for Shakespeare. He wanted to understand the deeper mythology, the philosophical implications of the Force, the political subtext of the Republic's fall. He came to meetings with pages of notes, questions about character motivation, and suggestions for exploring the psychological realism of Jedi training. Lucas was appalled. He wanted to turn Star Wars into some kind of graduate seminar. Lucas complained to associates. He kept asking about the psychological truth of lightsaber combat and the emotional authenticity of Force powers. It was exhausting. The breaking point came when Hurt suggested that the Jedi should struggle more with doubt, that their certainty was psychologically unrealistic. He wanted to explore the trauma of taking children from their families, the emotional cost of suppressing attachment. Lucas shut him down immediately. "This isn't method acting," Lucas reportedly said. "This is mythology. These characters represent archetypes, not psychological case studies. If you can't understand that, you don't understand Star Wars." Hurt was never seriously considered again for any Lucasfilm project. Lucas made it clear to casting directors that he found the actor incompatible with his vision. The irony is that many of Hurt's suggestions, exploring the psychological cost of Jedi training, the trauma of separation from family, became central themes in later Star Wars projects. But Lucas never acknowledged this, and Hurt remained blacklisted from the galaxy far, far away. Number 4. Alec Guinness. The Alec Guinness situation was perhaps the most painful for George Lucas because it involved someone he genuinely respected turning against him publicly. Their relationship started with mutual admiration and ended in bitter resentment. When Lucas cast Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi, he was getting one of Britain's most distinguished actors. Guinness brought gravitas, intelligence, and classical training to the role. He was everything Lucas wanted in his wise Jedi master. But Guinness hated the dialogue from day one. In private letters that were later published, Guinness called the Star Wars script rubbish and described the dialogue as bloody awful. He complained that Lucas had no ear for how people actually spoke and that the philosophical concepts were pretentious nonsense dressed up as wisdom. Initially, Guinness kept his complaints private, delivering his lines professionally despite his personal reservations. But as Star Wars became a cultural phenomenon, his disdain became public. In interviews, Guinness began openly mocking the films. He called them fairy tales for children and expressed embarrassment about his association with the franchise. He famously told a young fan to forget about Star Wars and focus on real films. Lucas was devastated. This wasn't just criticism. It was betrayal from someone he trusted with one of his most important characters. The relationship deteriorated further during production of The Empire Strikes Back. Guinness pushed Lucas to kill off Obi-Wan, not for story reasons, but because he wanted out of the franchise. He made it clear that he found the material beneath his talents. Alec treated Star Wars like it was some kind of embarrassing mistake, Lucas later said. He took the money, he did the work, but he never stopped letting everyone know that he thought it was garbage. When Guinness died in 2000, Lucas's statement was notably cold and brief. There was no warm tribute, no fond memories shared, just a perfunctory acknowledgement of his contribution to the films. Number 3. Carrie Fisher. The Carrie Fisher feud was the most personal for George Lucas because it involved someone who had been part of his extended family, turning against him with devastating wit and public humiliation. Fisher's problems with Lucas began during the original trilogy but exploded into open warfare during the special edition releases and prequel era. What started as private complaints about working conditions became a public roasting that lasted decades. Fisher never forgave Lucas for what she called the metal bikini incident, being forced to wear the revealing slave costume in Return of the Jedi. She felt objectified and exploited, and she blamed Lucas personally for what she saw as a betrayal of Leia's strong character. But the real war began when Fisher started doing stand-up comedy and talk show appearances, where she mercilessly mocked Lucas and the Star Wars franchise. Her impressions of Lucas were devastating. She portrayed him as a socially awkward control freak obsessed with toys and special effects. "George Lucas ruined my life," Fisher would joke in her act. "I'm an alcoholic because of him. Every time someone mentions Star Wars, I need a drink." Lucas was furious. He felt that Fisher was biting the hand that fed her, using her Star Wars fame to attack the very franchise that made her career possible. The situation got worse when Fisher began writing books and giving interviews where she detailed the allegedly toxic atmosphere on Lucas's sets. She described him as cold, controlling, and more interested in his technical toys than his actors' well-being. Fisher's most devastating attack came during a roast where she said, "George Lucas is proof that you can be a billionaire and still have no idea how human beings actually talk to each other." Lucas never publicly responded to Fisher's attacks, but industry insiders say he was deeply hurt by her betrayal. He'd considered her part of his Star Wars family, and her public mockery felt like a personal attack on everything he'd built. When Fisher died in 2016, Lucas's tribute was notably restrained. While others in Hollywood shared warm personal memories, Lucas's statement was formal and distant, a final sign that some wounds never heal. Number 2. Harrison Ford. The Harrison Ford situation represents George Lucas's most frustrating professional relationship. A decades-long battle of wills between a director who demanded loyalty and an actor who refused to be controlled. Ford's problems with Lucas began almost immediately during Star Wars production. The actor famously told Lucas, "George, you can type this shit, but you can't say it," referring to the dialogue. It was meant as a joke, but Lucas didn't find it funny. What followed was 3 films worth of constant friction. Ford would openly mock the dialogue during takes, suggest rewrites on set, and generally treat Lucas's carefully crafted scripts as rough drafts that needed his input. Lucas was infuriated by Ford's attitude. He'd written these characters, created this universe, and built this mythology. Having his lead actor constantly question his choices felt like insubordination. The breaking point came during Return of the Jedi when Ford pushed Lucas to kill off Han Solo. Ford argued that it would give the character a meaningful arc and dramatic weight. Lucas refused, seeing it as Ford's attempt to escape the franchise that made him famous. Harrison never understood what Star Wars was about, Lucas later complained. He thought it was just another job, another paycheck. He never respected the mythology we were building. Ford's disdain for the franchise became public knowledge. In interviews, he would dismiss Star Wars as not my kind of thing and make it clear that he preferred his other roles. He famously said he wished Han Solo had stayed frozen in carbonite. When Lucas began planning the prequel trilogy, Ford made it clear he had no interest in returning. Lucas didn't ask twice. The animosity continued for decades. When Disney acquired Lucasfilm and brought Ford back for the sequel trilogy, Lucas was notably absent from the announcement and celebration. Industry insiders say he was furious that Ford was being welcomed back after years of publicly dismissing the franchise. Ford's return to Star Wars without Lucas's involvement was seen by many as the ultimate insult. The actor who had spent decades mocking Lucas's creation was now being celebrated for returning to it, while Lucas himself had been pushed aside. Number 1. David Prowse, and here we are, the ultimate betrayal. David Prowse's relationship with George Lucas started as a dream collaboration and ended as the most bitter feud in Star Wars history. Prowse was Lucas's physical Darth Vader, the imposing 6'6" presence that made the Dark Lord of the Sith terrifying. For 3 films, he was the body that brought Lucas's greatest villain to life. But Prowse had ambitions beyond just wearing the costume. He wanted to be the voice of Vader too, and when Lucas chose James Earl Jones instead, the seeds of resentment were planted. The real problems began when Prowse started talking to the press. A lot. During production of The Empire Strikes Back, Prowse gave an interview to a British newspaper where he revealed major plot points, including Vader's relationship to Luke Skywalker. Lucas was furious. This was supposed to be the biggest secret in cinema history, and his own actor had spoiled it. But Prowse didn't stop there. He continued giving interviews throughout the trilogy, revealing plot details, complaining about his treatment, and generally violating every confidentiality agreement he'd signed. Lucas felt personally betrayed. He'd trusted Prowse with one of his most important characters, and the actor had repeatedly violated that trust for publicity and attention. The final straw came when Prowse began appearing at fan conventions, signing autographs as Darth Vader and telling stories about the films that contradicted Lucas's official narrative. He would claim credit for character choices that weren't his and reveal behind-the-scenes details that Lucas wanted kept private. Lucas's revenge was swift and brutal. He banned Prowse from official Star Wars events, refused to invite him to premieres, and made it clear that the actor was persona non grata in the Star Wars universe. When Return of the Jedi was filmed, Lucas made sure Prowse didn't even know he was being replaced in the unmasking scene. The actor showed up to set expecting to film Vader's death, only to discover that another actor had been hired for the crucial moment. Prowse spent the rest of his life fighting Lucas's blacklist. He was banned from official conventions, excluded from documentaries, and written out of Star Wars history as much as possible. When Prowse died in 2020, Lucas's statement was notably absent from the tributes. Even in death, the man who had been the physical embodiment of Darth Vader remained exiled from the galaxy he had helped create. George Lucas built an empire, but empires are built on the bones of the defeated. These 7 actors learned that crossing the creator of Star Wars wasn't just career suicide, it was exile from the most powerful franchise in entertainment history. Some of these feuds were justified, some were petty. All of them revealed the dark side of the man who gave us the Force, showing that even the most beloved creators can become the very villains they write about. Lucas may have retired from filmmaking, but his grudges live on, carved into Hollywood history like scars on the Death Star. Because in George Lucas's galaxy, there is no forgiveness, no redemption, and no second chances. The Empire never forgets and it never forgives. We are committed to releasing 2 videos a week. Like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more film lore.